Meredith Attwell Baker is the president of CTIA, the Wireless Association, an industry trade group that represents the international wireless telecommunications industry. Baker was a member of the United States Federal Communications Commission, FCC, nominated by President Obama and serving from 2009 to 2011. She also served in the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA, as a political appointee, and was subsequently named a Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Commerce Department by President George W. Bush in February 2007. Early life and education. Baker is a native of Houston, Texas and graduate of the prestigious St. John's School. She was an exchange student during high school, attending a semester at Sidwell Friends School. Coincidentally, she stayed with the family of Edward Lazarus, who was chief of staff during her partial term at the FCC. Her father, Kirby Attwell, is well known in Houston. He was president of Lincoln Liberty Life Insurance, a subsidiary of Lincoln Consolidated, where he worked with the late former Texas Democratic Senator Lloyd Bentsen. Her great-great-grandfather was Isaac Van Zandt, a political leader in the Republic of Texas, who was appointed charge d'affaires to the United States from 1842 to 1845 in D.C. The Attwells have been longtime friends of the Baker and Bush political families. She has spent much of her life in the District of Columbia area. In addition to the high school semester spent at Sidwell, she studied journalism and Spanish at the private Washington and Lee University in Lexington, Virginia. After graduation in 1990, she was hired at the Legislative Affairs Office of the State Department in D.C. during the administration of President George H.W. Bush, where her future father-in-law was then Secretary of State James A. Baker III. Baker left to attend the University of Houston's Law School, graduating in 1994. While there, she worked at the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. She is a member of the State Bar of Texas. Career. CTIA. Baker became the president and CEO of CTIA in 2014 with a promise to bring new ideas and initiatives to the CTIA, such as bringing in technical and engineering expertise related to spectrum and wireless technologies. The wireless industry has grown significantly over the past decade and now permeates every part of our lives, from education and healthcare to energy and business, said Baker at the time of her appointment. CTIA should be in the center of discussions about how wireless is reshaping our economy, our society and our culture. I look forward to continuing CTIA's long tradition of finding bipartisan solutions to ensure adequate spectrum availability and opportunities to unlock the next generation of investment and innovation. Quote, Comcast. In mid-May 2011, 4 months after voting to support the merger of Comcast and NBC Universal, Baker accepted a job with Comcast as Senior Vice President of Governmental Affairs for NBC Universal, beginning June 3. The president of Comcast said her executive branch and business experience, along with her exceptional relationships in Washington, bring Comcast and NBC Universal the perfect combination of skills. Quote, 12. Another Comcast executive said this event would not become national news, describing it as chatter, in spite of the extensive national coverage to date, said The Hill. 34. He described Baker as one of those people that actually takes ethical responsibilities seriously. Quote, 34. The FCC chairman, Julius Genachowski, said, I wish her well in her new role at NBC Universal. Whereas fellow Commissioner Michael J. Copps, who voted against the Comcast-NBC merger, expressed surprise at her departure. Quote, Baker's move to Comcast was criticized by many newspapers and organizations. The Center for Responsive Politics said, "It's a big boon for Comcast," noting that consumers can't afford to hire someone of a similar stature to advocate for them. Timothy P. Carney, a political columnist for the Washington Examiner, characterized it as unseemly and depressing that she monetize her public service in this way. The New York Times editorialized that her swift shift from regulator to lobbyist for the regulated will only add to Americans' cynicism about their government. Michael Scherer of Time magazine wrote, quote, "If you stand up for wealthy interests while serving the public interest, chances are there is a nice fat paycheck waiting for you somewhere when you choose to leave government." Jon Stewart of The Daily Show, an American late-night satirical television program, ridiculed the timing by first feigning praise of Baker for her stated desire for government efficiency, saying, "Finally, someone in government who is not just looking out for no 1 inch. And then after airing a news clip announcing the Comcast job, 2 audible groans from the audience responded sardonically, "Well, that was fast." Quote, on the other hand, commentators noted that the revolving door between government and industry is all too common, though usually not so rapid. The Los Angeles Times described the inference that she supported the Comcast-NBC merger as her ticket to employment as silly, concluding that her stance was consistent with her philosophical views. The vice president of the Media Access Project, a communications advocacy organization, said, "The revolving door at the FCC is a major problem. But Commissioner Baker is following the rules, and her actions are no different than many of her predecessors." He stated his belief that Baker was a thoughtful FCC commissioner and conscientious public servant. Quote, the president of the National Association of Broadcasters commended Baker, saying, "Her in-depth knowledge of broadcast issues, deep understanding of the D.C. landscape and strong leadership abilities will make her an important resource for the entire broadcast industry." Quote, while Baker could immediately lobby Congress and supervise employees who directly lobby the FCC to comply with President Barack Obama's ethics pledge, she could not personally lobby any executive branch political appointee, including the FCC, while Obama is in office. However, after 2 years, she could lobby non-political appointees at the FCC. Additionally, she may never personally lobby anyone on the Comcast-NBC merger agreement. Baker expressed surprise that she was hired in light of these lobbying restrictions. However, the Seattle Times editorialized, "The restrictions are of little worth. Any lobbying will begin and end with her. It does not matter if she has a minion doing her bidding. The result is the same." Quote, FCC. Baker was nominated for a Republican seat on the FCC by President Barack Obama on June 25, 2009. After the nomination was paired with Mignon Clyburn for the Democratic seat to avoid controversy, she was unanimously confirmed by the United States Senate on July 24, 2009, and sworn in as commissioner on July 31, 2009. According to the Associated Press, Baker was a reliable pro-business voice who frequently expressed concern that the agency was imposing unnecessary and onerous regulations on phone and cable companies. She opposed network neutrality, a position shared by the cable and telephone industry. In March 2011, she stated that the review of the Comcast-NBC merger took too long, and there were too many conditions forced on Comcast, including accountability for access and services such as Netflix and YouTube. Commerce Department. In January 2004, Baker joined the National Telecommunications and Information Administration (NTIA) as a political appointee, and was subsequently named a Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Commerce Department by President George W. Bush in February 2007. After the November resignation of John Muir, less than a year after he started the job, to join Rivada Networks as Senior Vice President for Strategic Planning and External Affairs, a revolving door euphemism for lobbyist. She filled vacancies as Acting Assistant Secretary for Communications and Information and Acting Administrator of the NTIA. She was not confirmed for these positions. Neil Patel, an aide to then Vice President Dick Cheney, was nominated instead, but the Senate never acted upon the nomination. She supported Comcast against the FCC during the network neutrality conflict. Comcast arbitrarily blocked transmission of peer-to-peer and collaborative software content, such as BitTorrent, Nutella, Lotus Notes, and Google applications. During her time at NTIA, the department was criticized for problems during the transition to digital television, as the administration imposed restrictive time limits on consumer participation and drastically underestimated the amount of funding that would be needed. Although some Democrats credited Baker for working in a bipartisan fashion to find solutions. Personal life. In 2006, she married James Addison Jamie Baker IV in Ravello, Italy. He is a son of James A. Baker III, who served as the Chief of Staff in President Ronald Reagan's first administration and as Secretary of State in the administration of President George H. W. Bush. He has 4 daughters from a previous marriage. They reside in McLean, Virginia. Meredith Attwell Baker, who runs Gov at The Washington Post C-SPAN program for communicators. FCC Commissioner Baker. Meredith Attwell Baker at Open Secrets. Email via FCC website.